So my name is Lakshmi Iyer. I head the education practice at Sanam S4, which is a global market entry consulting firm. And I'm here presenting with my lovely colleague, Chanchaljeet, who goes by the name CJ, who advises for University of Portsmouth in the UK. What we have tried to do is to kind of use a case study to bring forth certain themes around identifying changing career paradigms around the world, and how we in India could kind of take a few lessons from that. So one of the, in the process of course selection, students are heavily influenced by external factors. That is a given. And in India, it is very much influenced by earning capacity. It is influenced by key buzzwords that are flavors of the season. Every year, we will have a new course that suddenly seems to be attracting a lot of attention, and you will have students and parents asking questions about that, which makes the jobs of institutions and educators really quite difficult, because we probably need to be the most widely read and most deeply read to be able to give proper advice to the students and parents who are thinking of spending all that money, who are really anxious about future career growth, and so on and so forth. So the designing of programs, if you look at what's happening worldwide, is quite heavily influenced by employer requirements. And this is a bridge that India needs to increasingly kind of, cross and start making sense of all that is going on around us, because it's not even the millennials, it's the post-millennials that we have to now deal with, who have got all the information at their fingertips, who probably know more about blockchain and automation than you and I would ever do, and who are going to consume information and understand information completely differently from how we are used to. So the aim of this presentation is about kind of underlining the need to adopt a very aware and more rigorous approach to understanding student needs, and how that could probably enable us to design programs that would resonate with our target audience. It's quite difficult for institutions of higher learning to do that in this current environment. And it makes all the more difficult the jobs of school counselors, because they are preparing students to take on a world where half of, probably more than 70% of those jobs that they are going to go into in 5 to 10 years' time, we don't even know whether they exist currently or not. So this is what we are all currently living through. It is an economy that has got continuous disruption, and creative disruption at that. 5 years ago, if somebody would have told me that, I would be ordering my groceries online, and I would kind of probably even think of doing away with owning a car and going everywhere in a shared cab sat in by someone and driven by different people at different points in time, I would have been in utter disbelief. But that is my life right now, and I shudder to think what's going to happen in another 5 years, because I live in this constant fear of missing out on new technology changes. Somebody asked me a question, how would I even answer? So I dread to think what it would be the case of a counselor who needs to counsel students about future career options. So, this probably is the most critical slide from my perspective for the first 7 or 8 slides that I need to speak to. I think new industries have emerged, others have completely disappeared. And the interesting thing that we are seeing in India is a clear structural shift from agrarian economy to more services. And particularly it has got to do with construction, trade, transport, logistics, and so on and so forth. And what is happening is that, employers just don't know how to deal with people, staff members who are used to a shared economy, are not looking at lifelong careers, would probably kind of, be continuous learners. And that is going to be the biggest challenge even for school level educators to be kind of, talking to students about that you can never stop learning. And we suddenly are seeing even government-wide initiatives. For example, 2 weeks ago, there was the New Zealand Higher Education Conference, where micro-credentials have come to the attention at the government level and saying that New Zealand institutions should start offering micro-credentials as a way of kind of upping the skills of the population. So these are no longer kind of becoming decisions that are taken at a very well-to-do school or a college that has got deep pockets to kind of invest in technologies and techniques for their students. But these are government-level initiatives. These have got impact on nationwide policies. This is about destinies of population that we are talking about here. So when it comes to India, what we are really seeing are rapid advances in automation technologies that are affecting us. We have micro-entrepreneurship that has suddenly come to the forefront with people's ability to sell anything and everything on Amazons and the Flipkarts of the world. You could become an entrepreneur sat at home, which to my generation, and I am in my early 40s, I would never have thought that, that could happen in my lifetime. And I am actually kind of really, really excited to be looking into the future to think that in my 60s, what am I going to see? So, because that is the pace of change that we are seeing currently in front of us. And the interesting thing is that India, probably as a result of man-made kind of decisions that have been impacted by human beings, will have to go through a lot more changes than probably other economies of the world. And we are, after all, home to the second largest population in the world and soon to overtake China as the most populous nation. So I think we have, as a country, as a group of educators here who are going to think through and talk through different issues over the next 48 hours or so, have a lot more at stake than other countries where the population is aging. But we are going to be the workforce of the world. But for us to be able to reap the demographic dividend that we toy about a lot, there is a lot of work that needs to be happening at the school level. So this is a very interesting slide, and there are, it's got a lot of text, forgive me for that, but there are 3 things that I would kind of, draw your attention to in terms of this slide. One is a commitment to learning as a preparation to take on the future. The next one is the kind of new age roles that we are seeing emerging. And the third one is, the new age set of skills. And probably, if I were to get an opportunity to come back and talk about this topic in another 12 to 24 months, we would have another set of skills that go up on the slide. And here, one of the key things that we have to understand is that the on-demand economy is rapidly kind of, replacing business models that you and I are familiar with. The second thing is that probably, so we all hear about machine learning, we hear about automation, we hear about robots taking our jobs, and so on and so forth. But what in that, we had an educator in design in our office about 10 days ago. And he was talking about weaving to me. And he was saying that, do you realize? So he showed me a picture of this most intricate pattern that has been kind of, that is going into print. And he said, this actually a machine drew this pattern. Yeah. But what you need to kind of tell your students is that much as a robo can kind of, design this most intricate pattern, how they have to learn to live in a world where robots would be kind of doing the doing, but somebody needs to think about integrating those robots. There are more jobs to be created in a world where automation is going to be impacting everything that we do, but those sectors will probably create more jobs for students. So this whole fear of kind of, living in a world where everything for us is going to be done by machines, much as it is scary, it's also equally exciting because there are jobs and careers that are going to be there. There are two kind of key skills that I would kind of draw your attention to. One is new media literacy. I remember when I started this job 7 years ago, I had nothing to do with LinkedIn. I had nothing to do with Twitter. Today, I live in that world because that is my way to communicate with my constituencies. And my boss actually makes. There is a running joke in every management meeting that he brings out, which is that when I interviewed with him for the job, I said I don't know how to use a BlackBerry. And I don't like kind of living and breathing my job after 6 o'clock. So so long as I'm not connected to my job all the time, I'm happy to take this job. First day in the job, he gave me a BlackBerry and he said, you have to learn this, how to use this. And then since then, there has been no looking back. Today, to the extent that I actually feel that I have some kind of, new media kind of addiction, that I'm always checking my Twitter and I'm always kind of looking at LinkedIn and, this kind of, and I consider myself to be somebody with kind of really minimal skills in new media area. But the challenge that we have is that we are going to be living in a very immersive and stimulating world in the future, and at least our students are going to be. So if you don't even know what they are going to go through in that world, you probably are not in a position to guide them. The other thing is about transdisciplinary. I did a first degree in psychology. After that, did an MBA, and then I moved on with my life. But today's students, you would have biologists working very closely with mathematicians to figure out gene sequencing. Then you will have kind of, somebody from a completely different liberal arts background looking at kind of coding and thinking about what machines can help us do, or how you would help a machine to learn better as it figures out how to kind of, pick up a ball and then kind of, rotate that ball, that, the movements actually become very close to how a human being would handle something. So the ideal worker in today's world is somebody who will have a very deep understanding in one field, but could kind of, will have the capacity to converse in a very intelligent fashion with someone from a completely different discipline. And that really does require a sense of curiosity and a willingness to go above and beyond what your field of expertise is. And that is where I think, teachers and educators have a great role to play, because, the robots have still not reached that stage where they have that, human element to be thinking through these things. And, to instill a sense of curiosity in a child, that has to really come from the adult who is kind of, walking, who has walked the path before them and who can take them on that journey. And the other serious thing that we have to think about is the extended lifespans, that, we are going to be living longer than our parents, definitely longer than our grandparents and great-grandparents. And our children are going to probably, easily going to live over 100 years if all of the advances in genetics and everything is going to come to play and help them in extending lifespans, which means that they are going to have multiple careers. How many? We see our own parents taking up second careers after their retirement, but in our grandparents' generation, that never happened, and it is going to happen double quick in our lifespan. We could easily have third careers, not even second careers. And our children will definitely have fourth and fifth careers. And that is going to be, which means that, it puts a lot of pressure on the educational system. It puts pressure on employers. And it also kind of, it becomes very important then to develop workers of a certain quality who could kind of, take on that world. And more importantly, helping students and kids to filter and focus on what is important, because there is an overload of information. Now, having set the scene for, the world that we are going to kind of live in, the case study that, much before anything happened in Kerala that we picked up was on disaster management. Because climate change is not something that is not happening. It is happening as you and I sit here in this room. And that climate change has got such severe impact on everything that we are doing as human beings. And we have created, it is a man-made disaster. Climate change is a man-made disaster. And as one of the most densely populated and second most populous nation in the world, disaster recovery, disaster management has got tremendous significance in everything and anything that India does. So when CJ and I started talking about new careers, I do not. I mean, how may I please ask how many school counselors are here in this room? Okay. As when you are talking to students about their career aspirations, etc., how often do you hear about them wanting to choose something less linear and look at kind of other options, like becoming a paramedic who specializes in disaster recovery, something like that? Do you hear? No. It is because I think it's also got to do with how we are. Our education system is quite linear, if I may say so, because it only allows certain kind of very driven set patterns of career progression or thoughts about how you build your career. But unfortunately, the world that we are going to be living in the next kind of decade to 2 decades would have more and more occurrences of events that we are probably not kind of equipping our students at schools and colleges to handle. So in that context, before I hand off to my colleague to talk about this unique program that the university that she supports has got, as my background prep for this morning, I was looking at the National Institute of Disaster Management, which comes under the aegis of the Ministry of Home Affairs in India. And they do a lot of short-term programs on disaster recovery, but largely kind of looking at catering to professionals. But that level of awareness and sensitization should really happen from the school level so that people do look at different kinds of careers in this. Can someone, kind of guess as to how many people on an average every year go through this kind of, certification at this institute? Just, random guesses. Because, remember, it is in the context of a country that has got 1.2 billion people. Yeah? Guesses?
200.
100, 200, okay. Less than 100, okay. Any other? Actually, you all are a lot less optimistic than I am. And I consider myself a pessimist. This is what I hear all the time at home. On an average, between 1,200 to 1,400. But, it's very interesting. In that website, it gives the data by states. So each state, how many people did that state send to this government agency to train them in, all sorts of disasters? So then I started drilling into the states because I, as a Keralite, these days, only thing that is on my mind is Kerala floods. Anywhere I turn, I'm like, okay, I need to think of what I can do to kind of help. And I said, okay, I will start looking at how many people from Kerala went through this training. On an average, every year, so they have data till 2016, 2017, 10 people from Kerala has kind of been funded to go into different training programs. And largely, then you start looking at what kind of courses did these people do, because you're very curious to know, okay, now the next level of kind of drilling down. Fire and safety, probably kind of in an earthquake, things like that. But what was the biggest problem that Kerala had when it had floods? People had built walls around their plots. The boats couldn't go in. So it was all to do with urbanization and how people kind of, because we are so many, we are all kind of protective of our little bubbles. So we built walls. And then when a disaster of that scale happens, boats are out, but boats can't go in because they hit walls. So it's about kind of, thinking through what the consequences are of, these kinds of man-made disasters, because more than Mother Nature turning on us, it's going to be us creating all these disasters for ourselves. I know that it's not a very pleasant topic to be tackling first thing in the morning, but, I do think that it's a very timely topic. And at this stage, I will hand off to my colleague, CJ.
Good morning, everybody. Well, this is a very dark and a stark slide to start my presentation with. But to carry the discussion further, I want to emphasize that there are no jobs on a dead planet, which means that survival is the most important thing, in spite of, may it be the fourth revolution, the fifth, or the sixth revolution. The first and the most important thing is survival. And therefore, today, we have taken up this topic of crisis and disaster management to carry this discussion forward and also emphasize that how the employment landscape is rapidly changing. The world lost $306 billion in the year 2017. 26 million people are forced into poverty every year because of disasters. According to the National Disaster Management Authority, India is prone to disasters like floods, cyclones, tsunamis, and these are annual features. These happen every year. 59% of India's landmass is prone to earthquakes, 12% to cyclones, and about 76% of India's coastline is prone to cyclones and tsunamis. To show an example of the severity of this problem, this is a classic example, the recent Kerala floods. Right from the decision of opening the sluice gates, to the not giving adequate warning to the people for evacuation, to opening the flood, to opening the dams when they were just overflowing, everything went wrong. The government was grossly unprepared. Around 2,500 crores are spent every year on disaster management, but almost everything is spent only on relief and rehabilitation. What we need to do is we need to change the perspective. We need to spend more on mitigation, we need to spend more on preparedness, and we need to plan ahead. During the Kerala floods, we saw how unorganized and how little poor communication there was between the several sectors of government. What we need to do at this stage is we need to question ourselves that how do we tackle this? This is a problem of a large magnitude. How do we carry it forward? How do we actually find a solution to this? We definitely need skilled, technical, strong, capable team to be able to handle this. We definitely need strong disaster management professionals. Now, what is disaster management? As a career field, disaster management would mean the management of resources and programs to prepare, plan, mitigate, and respond to emergency situations during disasters. The typical job profile would include analyzing and preparing, risk assessment, training of people, safety awareness, creating awareness amongst public, coordinating amongst various agencies during disasters, and responding to disaster situations immediately and in an effective way. The typical career profiles for these kind of jobs would be jobs in emergency planning committees, jobs with government organizations, NGOs, humanitarian aids, and so on. Now, this job has high motivation factors. A, because there is a humanitarian angle to the whole thing. B, it is high impact. You are actually helping a nation cope and prepare for disasters. And then, of course, it is highly action-oriented. There is not a day of monotony. Last but not the least, it's a very, very well-paid job. This is just to give an example of one particular career stream that I have chosen, but there are several emerging and exciting careers that are there. At University of Portsmouth, we have this course, which is endorsed by the EPC. Students get the real opportunity to work with specialists and experts from the field. It is a cross-disciplinary course, which involves two departments, the Earth and Geological Sciences and Strategy and Business Management. The USP of this particular course is that they conduct a 3-day simulation exercise. It's a live simulation exercise which is conducted in Portsmouth. 50 top organizations of the world participate, 300 participants, and it is run over for a period of 3 days. Now, very interesting thing about this CIMAX is that The University of Portsmouth involved several departments and faculties to actually get this going, including the drama and the theatre department. So I'll show you a video, and what you will see is that it is several faculties have come together to put this live simulation exercise so that everybody gets a real feel of the disasters.
The earthquake hit on Sunday evening in the affected country of Iraq, which is actually the Cayman Islands. Emergency teams were activated and mobilized and were coordinating with each other.
I think I've always wanted a career that'll help me make a difference to people. And when it comes to that, as a house, I have a role in response and help people real planning.
Sorry, I think there's some technical glitch there.
The earthquake.
It might play better if you go back to the PowerPoint link there.
Yeah.
The earthquake hit on Sunday evening in the affected various roles in an emergency response to an earthquake, looking at urban search and rescue and state management response.
Anyways, let me go forward from here. I think this is not cooperating. So this case study was one example of how varied and diverse the career options are today. At University of Portsmouth, to be industry relevant and to make students future ready for the courses, for the careers that are there are new courses, new industry courses which are introduced at a regular level. There is a lot of investment that is going on in infrastructure. The university is spending about £400 million in the next 5 years to meet the demands of the future career-ready courses. And then a very important bit of the whole aspect is regular feedback from the employers. So we keep all these three things in mind to enable students to be ready for the future courses, for the future careers that will be there. This is how a course is developed. These are the reference points that we pick up when we actually introduce a new course. We first look at the expertise of the faculty that is there within the university. For example, in the Crisis and Disaster Management course, Naomi Morris, the course leader, is actually somebody who's worked in disaster zones in countries like Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan. She's also the Unit Secretariat for Simulations and Training Exercise. We conduct regular surveys among agents, prospective students, universities, and find out the portfolio gaps that are there and what is in demand in the market. And then again, we take regular feedback from the employers and understand what it takes to have industry-relevant courses. To summarize and conclude, I just want to emphasize on, with what we started the presentation, that this is an era of specialization and not generalization. It is a little like the law of demand and supply. If there is something which is too much in supply, the demand goes down. But if something is short in supply, the demand automatically goes up. In the year 2017, around 2 lakh students completed their MBA degrees, out of which only 47% actually got placed. It's high time we move out of the traditional career routes and start thinking about the niche careers. In most modern economies today, most of the career routes that are there did not even exist 10 years back or even 5 years back. And according to a study, 65% of the primary school students will actually end up in courses, in careers which do not even exist as yet. In such a rapidly evolving employment landscape, the need to change and adapt is even more. There are opportunities all over, but we just need to align our skills to the changing demands of the economy. We just need to be at the right place with the right skills. Thank you.
do well in disaster areas, but I think also looking at putting a fence at the top of a cliff rather than putting the ambulance at the bottom is much more about educating the students and bringing a career program into schools where it's not just about counselling at the top end, years 12, 13. It's about bringing students in and making them understand about the career opportunities and not giving them that linear. So they have to learn about the non-linears in a career education program much, much earlier.
Yes.
Would you agree? And you know, maybe that's something that the government needs to be looking at, putting in a really good career education program as opposed to the counselling as well. So career education and development.
Yes, I completely kind of, agree to the, the views that you have kind of shared with us. I think the challenge that we face is that our curricula are designed by people who are probably kind of not thinking through some of these consequences of not making people aware of the changes that are almost upon us, because it's not even a change that you are sort of seeing in the horizon. You are living these changes, but not being able to process that and not being able to reflect that in the curriculum. And it's very important to be kind of, thinking, making students aware of what these changing paradigms are as school kids, and not at the stage when they are thinking of, okay, I've finished my 12th grade and I want to go into a career. It's not, because at that time your ideas are already kind of pretty fixed. You know that I want to try becoming this, and you're not going to change that. And as educators, then it becomes all the more important that you're talking to them about alternative career paths. And it's okay to be different, because that is another challenge that we have, because we are not very kind to outliers. We like cookie cutter approach. We want everybody to be the same because it is easier to process that information that way. So yeah, I agree with you.
I think as parents, we often want to say, my son is a doctor, or my son is, sorry to go on. But these days, there are no such thing. Like there are so many different careers out there.
Yes, yeah.
That, and it's hard to put it into words. It's hard to articulate.
Yes.
So parents as well need the education.
Yeah, and I think the impact of a counselor and a teacher at a school level. I mean, all of us can talk about a teacher at the school level who really influenced us and changed how we thought about ourselves, what we wanted to do with our lives. And, I can still think of my biology teacher, and the minute I start talking about her, I can only weep. But, how they kind of, how you can influence the career path. And it's okay to be kind of, choosing something that your parents might not approve. I mean, how often have we come across students who say that, not interested in engineering, but my father wants me to go into this, so I am kind of doing this, but my heart is elsewhere, maybe as an illustrator,
I have a daughter who's 13, and she's an above average student. Like, I'm not a marks obsessed parent, so I don't push her that much, but she's really good in arts. And she's now, I am seeing that, really good in technology. So I used to wonder that I don't know what she's going to do, maybe turn into an artist or something. Suddenly, a week back, she tells me, I'm thinking I want to pursue film animation. And I was like, I didn't even think about it. So it was interesting to hear that from her.
I'm going to take this away a little bit. When you're talking about anxieties and all, a lot of it has to do with the political and cultural landscape in a lot of countries, and so parents are anxious. I'm just thinking, we have already gone into work from home. And so do you think in a few years this will really take on the thing of study at home in the point of online courses? Here in India, we see online courses as, okay, something that you might do along with something else. But a lot of universities, like the University of South Florida, the online courses are as intensive and as expensive as the other courses. But students don't want to take them because they want that experience of going there. So do you think that is going to happen? Because, like, say, in our university, the online faculty is different. You have to be specifically trained to teach an online course. So do you think that see that happening in a few years, and would that address some of the anxieties that families feel about sending their children?
It's a very good question. What we definitely see in India at this point in time are the popularity of online programs, probably the massively open online courses, the MOOCs, as a way to upskill. So these are individuals who already have a qualification. So they are assured of a job somewhere, because no, employer is going to sit back and say, okay, you have done all this, but what is your degree? So they want to have some kind of insurance against that question. But I think definitely in the next 10 to 15 years, this is going to drastically change, primarily because of the pressure on our higher education system. It just can't absorb the number of students coming through the primary and secondary education. And the acceptance of, because in India, the change is driven by the end consumer. It's never about, forward thinking and putting a policy framework in place that is an enabler. I had a very interesting discussion with an academic just before getting into my session, where he had been at a panel discussion a couple of days ago, where obviously some of the most respected private universities had gotten together and they were discussing about their capacities. They all have capacities up to 3,000 students, and that is not going to kind of change India's problems. And he was saying, how is this going to change, Lakshmi? And I was saying, it is only going to change when you really have high level of massification of good quality. And that can only happen in the online space. And employers will have to accept that someone who has come with a selection of certifications that they have acquired via an online method, and there is a way to kind of test the outcome, right? At the end of the day, somebody is going out and buying a car, they will do a test drive, they are happy with it, they will get into the car and off they go. Likewise, an employer, so long as he or she is assured that whosoever they are employing has got the necessary skills, they are not going to be bothered whether the person has acquired it online or not. But that has to come from the employment ecosystem, and not necessarily through government this thing. Because when that pressure then comes on the government is forced to change how it looks at this whole paradigm. Because the policy landscape per se, right now we know that there isn't even an overarching framework for recognition and acceptance of online qualifications, which is, the sad truth. But I remain hopeful that, in the next 5 to 10 years, that will definitely change.
Also, like Lakshmi mentioned earlier, that there is a need for multiple careers and cross-disciplinary qualifications. So this is also going to drive online qualifications a lot, I guess.
If I could comment really quickly. There are some programs in the United States that are online, and the diploma does not read completed online. It reads associate's degree or bachelor's degree, and I think that's the starting point for much of this. Moving forward, I can present myself as completing a bachelor's at the University of X, and the employer does not know that it was an online program. So that's your next conversation piece.
No visas to worry about.
Yes. And I think, India has always remained a country where career aspirations have been driven by where people have ended up in their jobs, and how much they have earned, and which newspaper published it. And so long as, there could be like good news stories around people who have kind of, right now, for example, there used to be a time in India where, homeschooling, somebody is homeschooled, that means that person has got some problem, But the day someone who was homeschooled got into an IIT, whole paradigm changed, right? Oh my God, okay, this is okay, So someone has to tell us that it is okay. And, so long as, counselors and parents become okay with it, then, the student will not have a problem kind of, identifying online stuff that they can do and be a better kind of, offering in the job market.
I was wondering, of the courses that were listed as the specialized courses, how many were graduate versus undergrad? Because just looking at the new age skills, I see that as a great place to be. I see them as being developed more at the undergraduate level, those new age skills, and then maybe at the graduate level, that's where we can look at that specialization in these new fields. What are your thoughts?
So, speaking from the University of Portsmouth's context, we have 190 undergraduate courses, and most of them, a lot of them are actually the new age courses that are there. So yes, these courses are introduced at a undergraduate level, and then there is specialization further at a postgraduate level.
I just wanted to know, addressing anxieties of parents, does it make equal sense? Because most of the times students follow career paths that their parents influence them and want them to follow. And then after developing skill sets in that particular area, when they work in the industry and realize this is not what I want to do, and this is another thing that I want to do, employers are not very open to taking students that do not have relevant backgrounds. So, do you think addressing anxieties of parents should also be a part of the career development curriculum at high schools?
I think yes. My answer is a resounding yes to that, because the pressures that kids are put through at homes, when parents decide to live vicariously through them, getting them to do things that they couldn't do. I mean, my best friend, her son goes to every. I mean, I don't have children myself, but I have kind of friends who have got children, and I'm thinking that my friend is competing. I'm like saying, just let him be, because the child loves to come to my house because, I'm like, yeah, I'm the nice aunt who doesn't have the responsibility for his future. But, he is going through every, tuition for every subject, tennis lessons. He's this most accomplished kid who will ever kind of walk the earth. And this goes back to, the parent wanting to make sure that the child is equipped. And this is their way of trying to do that, give them the skills to cope, because they really don't know what is in future in the offing. But as at the school level, I probably think that schools need to start thinking about involving the parents in that counseling process. And I see this now more prevalent in India, in the space of where there are a lot more independent counselors emerging, where the counseling process is very involved. But then that counseling only starts taking place when the child is in the 8th or 9th standard, but it's slowly going to kind of, go down even further. And the parent is very heavily involved. And probably it takes the counselor 12 to 15 months to bring the parent around to the idea that, the child wanting to become a culinary artist is fine, he will be okay. Because you know what? MasterChef Australia is so popular here, and chefs are cool. So, it also brings back to the point of, somebody having to say that it is all right. And for that, as counselors, we have to be all right with it. Yeah. I mean, I remember, and sitting in interview panels in my first, in my previous role, and, interviewing potential counselors. And I'm looking at their educational qualification and I see a gap. And my demeanor used to change. What did you do? Why did you, take a break for 12 months? Did you not kind of, and the person is saying, okay, I mean, I decided to take a break, decided to look at something else. As an employer, I wasn't okay with it. I must confess, But over a period of time, I used to see that, people from kind of, arts and humanities background, they made excellent counselors. They really had a flair for kind of knowing more about kind of the students' requirements and aspirations and really speaking to that. And then, I started kind of bringing in people with very different and very varied experiences into the mix, because then they can assure the student and the parent that it's all right. It's okay that, you have done a science subject 12 standard, but you really are not interested in science. And you really want to kind of look at illustration. It's all right, So it's about kind of helping the parent also walk that journey, because the parent, at least in our social milieu, I cannot comment on other social milieus. My social milieu, I can say, even now my father and mother, what will society think of us? And these are our realities, and we will have to incorporate those elements in our counseling.
The most important thing is awareness. Most of the parents are not aware that these kind of courses even exist. So when I talk to parents and I tell them that, your kid, if he's interested in sports, he could go to sports management, or if he's interested in designing, maybe graphic designing or something, they actually feel happy about it. They're happy that there is something for the child who's not so study oriented but has skills in other areas.
Good morning, ma'am. Ma'am, see, in India, our education system is more directed rather than being a part of self-exploration. So I would like to seek your suggestion that at school level, what changes should be brought? Our curriculum doesn't provide any such unusual courses or any implementation of such things in the school curricula. So what changes should be brought at school level so that awareness about such things can be brought in the students?
I think
Can I add a supplement?
Yes.
Sorry. For example, I think one important change is things like fine arts and all are not counted as in the best of four. So like my daughter's in the 12th and she wanted to take up fine arts and a few people told her no. And I said, no, just go ahead and take it up. But yes, she sometimes feels she's at a disadvantage because her fine arts marks will not be counted. So,
yeah, and this goes back to the point, that was earlier made, that building a curriculum at the school level obviously is under the control of national bodies, where the awareness levels could be better. But I think it's slowly changing. Who would have thought that we would have had vocational element in our curriculum a few years ago? I mean, when I was growing up, and it was only like you had all these subjects, civics and politics, and that is it. Off you go. I mean, nobody said that you could take up like a vocational stream and so on. And that change has started happening. And that change again has happened not because of somebody actually said, okay, this is going to be India's future, because we desperately need skills. So that conversation has started happening around skills. And I think the next iteration is going to be people who are outliers. We are slowly getting used to the fact that everybody need not be a certain way, and it's all right to, and imagine what we are right now really happy with shuttlers, because we have got people who are getting medals in badminton, and we are ecstatic about it. So it's about kind of profiling achievers, and this is a problem with large population. Those who are more familiar with China would tell you the same thing, where certain kinds of, there are certain images about who you should be. And that will, that change will take time. But I think that change is happening because, we are home to, at the end of the day, half of the world's under 25 years of age population who are, consuming and information very differently, looking at themselves very differently, and who are going to kind of be doing things very differently, So, and that change will have to happen in the curriculum, and it will happen over a period of time. It is not going to be something. And as educators, we can only kind of, okay, if you see a child who's really keen on fine arts, encouraging them rather than kind of telling them that, oh my God, you're going to be really useless because, who's going to pay for a picture that you draw? Rather than saying, maybe you could be the next Picasso. Who knows?
I personally think that for every skill that a student has, there is a customized career path that he or she could take. These days, the career options are really diverse and amazing. So they just need to identify what they're interested in.
And there is a marketplace for it, thanks to Amazon and Flipkart. Great. Okay, I'm getting, time out. Thanks, everyone.